So welcome to the first in our new series for 2026 of OSF Essentials webinars. So each of these are going to be focus sessions on different OSF topics each month. And these are built around the questions, the workflows, and the needs that we most often get asked about. So join us on the last Thursday of every month. We'll have a different topic for each. This month, we're going to talk about effective ways to use search tools to find cool stuff on OSF. I'll have some more information at the end of the session on our future series of webinars and some other training opportunities from Center for Open Science that will be coming soon. So stick around for those. So just some reminders before we get started. Please use the Q&A box for questions. We will answer as many of the questions during the session and at the end as we can. It's best to put them in the Q&A rather than the chat because they can just get kind of lost in the chat. You can, of course, introduce yourself in the chat. We'd love to know where everybody is. Get a little sense of the personal here in our weird internet interface. You will receive an email with the recording and slides, as well as a code for the discount on the OSF training that I mentioned. Again, more at the end of the session, so stick around for that. Okay, so if you're here, you're probably at least somewhat familiar with OSF. Likely you know it as a place to plan, organize, and share your research. But did you know that OSF is also home to more than 360,000 public projects, more than 250,000 public registrations, and more than 180,000 public preprints? So all of those are public and available for you to discover and explore. Oh, and I forgot about the 15 million public files. So today we're going to talk about how to use OSF Search. Specifically, we're going to talk about how does search actually work, particularly how it works in OSF, which might be different than other places you search for content like Google or other databases. We're going to go over techniques to help you find content in OSF that you're interested in. And we'll talk about how you might evaluate those search results once you have found them. So we're going to start with how does search actually work? So searching for things on the internet and in databases is built on metadata. If you're unfamiliar with metadata, the simplest explanation I can think of is that it is all of the information a system or a database stores about the content that you create or that you're interested in finding. Some of it is information that you add, and some of it is system-generated information. So let's just look at a few examples. So this should be very familiar to all of us, a research article. If we think of the article as the content or the data that we're looking for, the record that we first found in the database is the metadata. This metadata was probably created partly by the authors, the abstract, the title, but it was also probably created by professional indexers at this journal. So they would create the subject terms and the other kind of standard terminology in this. Sometimes metadata is actually hidden and embedded in things, created as a byproduct of a system. So for example, an email is data, it's content that we may be interested in knowing about. But an email also has a header with information about who sent it, when they sent it, who they sent it to. And there's also things that are even less obvious, like identification numbers and IP addresses and things like that, transaction logs. So sometimes we don't always necessarily see the metadata that is available in a system. And metadata isn't only for textual material. So this is a picture of my adorable cat, Clementine. Next to her is metadata that's encoded in the JPEG file, and it's displayed here using a tool called Adobe Lightroom. So the metadata in this picture is the name of the file, the date and time created, and then some of the characteristics of the image, like the size and the file format. If I wanted to, I could even manually add some more, like a title or a caption or a copyright statement. But without that metadata, I don't have any textual information about this image. So I know in some search engines, you can actually directly search images, but that's actually not very common in a lot of databases that deal with research data. So the metadata in this case is key for humans understanding what this data is and being able to find it. So finally, then in OSF, objects have both data in the files and the components that are created, the wiki, etc. But it also has metadata. It has titles and contributors and tags and activity logs. So a key here is that a difference between data and metadata is that the metadata is very structured. It's labeled and organized by type. So you can tell where the title is, you can tell what the description is, you can tell the difference between the different dates. And the structure is what makes it possible to create indexes of metadata. So we might have lots of metadata in a system, but the search is only going to search what is indexed from the metadata. So just very quickly, what is an index? Well, let's say I have a thing that I'm interested in. So in a database like Wikipedia or the Marvel Wikia, there is a record of metadata about the thing, his name, his species, where he's from, etc. But when we put a search term in the search, what actually happens is that the term is compared to a bunch of indexes, which are like lists of terms in each of the different specific categories. So here, if I'm looking for the thing, the character, I'm finding a match in an index of all of the character names in the database. So the important thing here is that there may be things in the metadata and there may be things in the content, but that doesn't necessarily mean that your search can find them. And if the search can't find them, then the data isn't findable. So why mention this? Because the first thing to understand is what is actually indexed in OSF. And the good news is that all of the metadata that you create is indexed. So title, description, contributor, subjects, tags, etc. All of that is indexed for search. However, unlike some other places you may search, the full text of documents that you upload are not indexed. So, for example, a big search engine like Google might index differently. It scrapes all the text on a page, whether it's metadata or data, and it makes indexes of all of those words. It probably also indexes different standard kinds of documents. But that means it also doesn't index data it can't get access to, data that is behind a database or metadata that may not be present on the page. It also uses a different algorithm to evaluate the results and determine what's most relevant. So it's important to understand that what you can do in OSF might be different than what you can do in another database because they're indexing different data and they're using a different algorithm for the relevance. This is also really important to understand in OSF that metadata has to exist in order for you to find the content. So a user or you in your own content have to take the time to create metadata if you want your content to be found. And that includes findable by you in the future. Just keep that in mind. Okay, so let's finally talk about OSF Search. If you like, you can go to OSF Search on your own computer to follow along. I'm going to do maybe a little bit of live demo, but I'm probably mostly going to use screenshots in this slide deck in the interest of time. But that is the URL for OSF Search. To navigate there, if you don't remember the URL, anytime you're in OSF, you can always use the link that's available in the sidebar to get to the OSF Search page. When you arrive at that page, you're actually going to see immediately a random sample of some of the things you can find in OSF. And the intention here is to give you a sense of what OSF content looks like right away, or to allow you to start browsing right away. So if you like, you can start just narrowing that sample of content by using the tabs that limit your results to just specific types of OSF content. So projects, registrations, preprints, files, and users. You will see at the top of the results the number of hits your search has made. And you can also choose to sort those in different ways. There are also additional filters along the side to help you narrow down on what you want even further. And of course, the results of your search are right there in the middle of the page. But you're most likely going to start search by using this search bar to search for some terms. So I'm going to go over each of these in a little more depth. So let's talk about the two major ways to narrow your search, because you can use these without inputting a search term. So tabs do a very high level sorting of content into the different types of material in OSF, as I said. So once you choose a tab, if I decide I only want to look at registrations, the information in the filters, which narrow the results further by specific categories of indexed metadata, those will adjust based on the tab that you selected. So the filters will always be accurate to what you're looking at in your results. Another important point about the filters is that these are generally what we call controlled terms. So these are things where the user had to pick from a list. They couldn't put something in one of these fields that wasn't already pre-selected to be there. So in some cases, that may mean that the term isn't quite as precise as it could be. However, it also means that you don't have lots of synonyms for the same concept. So the best search systems use controlled and uncontrolled or free text searches in combination. Remember what we said earlier, though, about metadata and indexing. The material in OSF has to have user-added terminology like subject or resource type for those particular filters to work. So these filters can help you pinpoint things you're interested in, but they may not be totally exhaustive. And this is also, yet again, another reminder to add metadata to your own content if you want people to find it, or if you want to find it yourself in the future when you've forgotten. Filters, once you click on them, will display a list of matches. Very large numbers of results will initially allow you to begin typing and will then narrow the results in that filter. Each term shows the number of results that selecting that option will narrow the results to. Once you've selected a filter, you can see it at the top of the filter list. You can then clear the filters individually by clicking the X. So here I am on OSF Search. I'm going to go just to registrations. I'm going to look at the subjects, and I can see here how many things we have in each of these topics. So I'm going to go ahead and choose medical specialties, and now you can see I've narrowed my results, and if I click the X there, I've taken this filter away. So filters are a great way to just help you narrow down the list. OSF Search has some special filter options, some unique ones that relate to specific types of content on OSF that you probably won't see other places. So all of the tabs, projects, registrations, preprints, not files and users, but these three main types of content, they have options that will allow you to sort by particular OSF relationships to each other. So preprints with linked projects or registrations. All of those tabs also offer you the ability to sort by license. So you can easily find content that is free to use, that has, limited restrictions on reuse. And you can also sort by institution when users, creators of the content are affiliated with our particular OSF member institutions. Registrations in particular have a couple of additional filters that allow you to select just registrations that have linked to specific types of output material. So if they have linked their final data or their code or their paper to their registration. So this is a great way to get directly at reusable stuff. Registrations also have templates that you can use to create the registration, and then you can also narrow your search that way. So if you're looking particularly for a specific type of research, like a systematic review, you can limit to just that registration template. So those are just some unique filters in OSF. The sort options are another way to help you quickly find what you're looking for. So by default, every search will return items based on what it judges to be relevant to your request. To simplify that quite a bit, it's mainly determined by the number of times your filter or query terms appears in the metadata for that content compared to the length of the metadata. So if it happens 10 times in a short document, that's very relevant. If it happens 10 times in a really long metadata um, record, that would be less relevant. But you can decide to view items based on the date they were created or the date they were last modified instead, if you're looking for more recent stuff or older stuff. So the filters, tabs, and the sorting tools you can use without even starting a specific search. The search page will return some content immediately. But it's more likely that you have specific things you want to search for. And in that case, you can use three different techniques to formulate search queries in OSF. You can search by keywords, you can create phrases, and you can combine terms. So let's take a look at those. Keyword searching is the simplest way to search. You put terms in the search box, and the indexes search for any of those words anywhere in any field in any order. You probably do keyword searching every single day somewhere on the internet. It returns, as I said, higher relevance if more of the words appear more frequently in the result. But keyword searching in OSF may also find words that are close but not the same as the word in the query. So, for example, here I might find things for both health and healthy, which is great. But when I get lower down in the relevance, I might find matches to things like heart or or hearth, because those are close words. So that's just something to keep in mind. Using a keyword search, just generally like this, will help you expand your scope, but it may bring in more noise. So you're going to get more results, but the drawback is that it will be less precise. Phrase searching adds some more precision. It finds exactly the words in your query. It will not find close matches like maternity, for example, compared to maternal. Um, and in addition, all of the words that are inside the double quotation marks must be present in the result. So the words may not necessarily be right next to each other, which is something that may be true in other search engines. But both terms exactly as written will appear in the results. So you can see here I've searched for maternal depression and I have 176 results. If I were to not put it in those quotation marks, I have 557 search results. So the benefit here is that my results are more precise, but I am getting fewer of them. The most powerful way to construct a query, though, is to combine terms using search operators. These are specific symbols that indicate different things. They're essentially the same as Boolean operators that you may use in other search engines, so and, or, and not. It's just that in OSF, it won't recognize those words, it will recognize these symbols. So a plus between terms means and, which means both of those terms must be present. But again, maybe anywhere in the document in any order, and in this case can be close matches, so researchers and reproducibility. This is the default way, actually, that any terms will be combined in OSF. So even if you don't include the plus sign, you're going to automatically combine those terms with an and. So you can see here, with or without the plus sign, I get the same number of results and in the same order. So more powerful then for you will be the pipe character, which means or. And that means either of the terms may be present in the results. If you don't know, the pipe is typically located on a key above the enter key on your keyboard, and it might appear as two smaller vertical lines stacked on top of each other. So in my search for maternal and paternal, or excuse me, maternal or paternal here, you can see that some results have paternal, like this one, and others have maternal. Um, Each of those terms are also being treated as close matches. So I'm also finding matches for maternity or paternity. If I put maternal and paternal in quotation marks, my results become even more precise because I'm using those quotes to say I want it to be exactly maternal and exactly paternal, but either one. So I'm making my results even more precise and more of what I want because I'm using two of these techniques. You can also use the dash or the minus sign to exclude terms. So I've done a search here for video games, but in fact, my research is focused on teen and adult users of video games. So I'm going to use the minus child tag here term to filter out the results that might be out of scope. Finally, you can combine complex ideas, and I can see here I forgot to do an animation on this slide. You can combine complex ideas by nesting terms in parentheses. So this helps when you have to combine concepts. Groups can be combined or nested in multiple ways. So in the first search, which you can't totally see here, I was looking for climate change studies. And I know that that could be referred to a lot of ways. So I put in climate change, global warming study experiment. But now that I know how search works, I know that this is actually looking for results that include some form of all of those terms, which is why I'm only getting 14 results. So if I more precisely want to find something that includes both concepts, but either or the terms, I can use a combination of parentheses to group the concepts, quotation marks to find the specific phrases, and the pipe to say or. So my search now is returning more than 2,000 results, and it's finding things that are about climate change or global warming and contain a term like study or a term like experiment. So you can see this, in this case, greatly expands the scope of my search, and then I'm using all three or three of those four techniques here. One other tip, as you're doing your searches in OSF, it's a great idea to write down what your search strategy has been. It can be very easy to forget what you've already tried. Um, and particularly if it's a search you're going to come back to, it's great to keep a record. Keep a record of the combinations of terms, the operators that you're using, along with the filters and tabs. I didn't use a lot of filters and tabs in those examples of the different keyword searching, but that is yet another way to narrow down and be more precise. This can help you to avoid repeating search methods that don't work, but can also help you if you're going to come back later to make sure that you're searching the same concepts. So finally, looking at the actual results that OSF returns, the search returns back brief records for each type of OSF object. And each of them has some kind of name, and in most cases, the contributors who created the content, the dates they were created and modified. And if you searched for a keyword, a snippet of any of the text in the metadata that has matched your query. The only exception would be user records, which don't have a title and don't have created and modified dates. From the brief record, there's an arrow up in the upper right, which you can click on to expand that record and see more information. So just to show it live, right here, you can see it slides out and slides back in. The expanded cards typically include a description, a license, and a DOI if those are present. For registrations and preprints in particular, there's also some specific information. For registration, you can see whether or not there's associated data or other kinds of materials. Any of those badges at the top that are filled in mean that that content has a link to the associated data, etc. These also tell you if they were part of a specific OSF registry, and what kind of registration template they use. For preprints, you can see if the preprint is part of a moderated community. You can also see, again, if it has associated data, if it has associated registration, and if there was a conflict of interest disclosed. For users, you can see the amount of public content they have posted to OSF. When you're looking through the results, there are a few things that might indicate to you that the research is particularly useful. Lots of simple terms in OSF can retrieve thousands of results. Even if I limit myself just to registration, with this simple search, I have more than 4,000 results. So one of the first things I can do to narrow it down quite a bit is to look at the subject areas. In this search, there's a big difference between studies related to social sciences and sciences further down the list. I might also want to go straight to results that I know that I can reuse. So in the license filter, I can choose one of several different kinds of licenses. With registrations in particular, I can look for those registrations like I just showed that actually have the links to those data, papers, etc. So if I choose one of these filters, everyone that comes back will have that badge filled in, and when I go to look at it, we'll have a link to that content. So I can use a combination of these to know that all of the registrations I'm looking at are good for reuse for me, for whatever my subject is, whatever my topic. When you're actually looking through all of the results, you can see then I've got all of the choices there, and I've narrowed myself down to 16, which might be more manageable for what I'm trying to do. When you're evaluating individual records, again, you can look for specific things. So again, I can see that there's code included along with other things. The description looks like it's longer than what will fit in there, which is great. So I can read a longer description by clicking through. If I look more closely at the metadata, I might look for the license, the DOI, to see has the user created a DOI for this, particularly with projects and preprints. That's not a default. And I might look at the subjects to see if they're aligned with my overall topic. So once you understand how the OSF search works, you can use the same techniques to search in other parts of the platform. So you can search specifically through a single user's content. You can look at a registry, a preprint, or a specific institution. And all of these pages use exactly the same search techniques. I did have some examples. I do want to leave time for questions. If we don't have questions, I can go back and do some of these examples. You'll get the slides after this, and these could be things that you could use to think about how you would put together a perfect, well, a good search query for each of these questions. I want to remind everybody before we start, end for questions, all of the content that I have covered is in an OSF search help guide. So if you go to help.osf.io and search for search, you will get directed to this search guide, which has all of the information that we've gone over in this webinar. So in addition to the slides, you always have that as a quick reference. So we can move on to questions. I'll ask my co-hosts to help me out. I don't have the Q&A open. Do we have any questions? Let's see. It looks like there are a few. It looks like folks are typing some answers to some of these, but I'm going to go ahead and answer a few or repeat the answers for some that have already been answered. So there's a question about OSF being only a place to register protocols, and that's not the case. OSF has different types of content. So there are project spaces, which are kind of open collaboration spaces for research individuals or groups to share materials, to share them with the public, to share them with each other. So there's lots of different type of content in the projects. And then we also have quite a number of preprints, which I'm sure you're familiar with preprints as, basically uh, articles. Sorry, I got distracted by a question. Someone asked about using OSF for scoping reviews or systematic literature reviews. And I think the general answer is a lot of the techniques I've gone over. I think specifically if you're looking for a real specific topic, you really want to think about how to make a good query using all of those different types of search operators. That's going to be the first thing that will really help you zone in on exactly what you need. But I will also mention that our next webinar in this series is going to be about systematic reviews and scoping reviews. So I'll talk about that in a second, but just to get you ready for that, we are going to be talking more about that. Uh, can the selection be interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary? Yes, it really depends on which subject you choose first to narrow things down. But again, if I come in here and I choose social and behavioral sciences, now when I look at my subject list, it's actually uh, the filters reflect my new results after having chosen that choice. So if I come down here and I'm looking for something here that's really different. So like say business. So now I'm down to things that have both, that are some multidisciplinary study of social and behavioral sciences and business, for example. And you can keep adding those as long as they exist. So I can see now I have psychology, marketing, arts and humanities, law. So now I'm looking at things that are at the intersection of those. The subjects are not required on all of the content. So this is another thing to remember that this is going to help you narrow in to find relevant materials, but it isn't going to be exhaustive because those things are not added by a professional indexer who comes in and adds that and makes sure that all of those things are there. Lots of questions about scoping review. Um, it's not clear to me how in practice to save my search strategy. That's a great question. So there's not a one specific way to do that. This document I found really interesting, which was that what this person was saying was, I'm going to do a couple of different searches. I'm going to search these terms that are listed here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc., and I'm going to search them with or. And then you can see, for example, down here, they put asterisks at the end of this. That's a thing in some databases that helps to expand in the same way ours does by default. So one way you can do this is just on a piece of paper, remembering to write down what you've done. Another thing is that if I search here, you can see my URL has actually copied all of the choices that I've made so far. So you can also do a search, grab that URL, copy and paste it into a document, and you'll have a record of the specific searches that you did there. And someone just asked about wildcards. No, you don't need to use wildcards because it kind of does that implicitly. Um, Lots of great questions here. And I mean, they have been answered. Let me look at the open ones. Um, the most liberal license is actually CC0, which is essentially public domain. But CC BY of the Creative Commons licenses is the least restrictive other than public domain. All of OSF services are free, so you can come in here, anybody, and search all of this. Um, The other thing I saw a few questions about that I'll answer before we wrap up is that when you search OSF, you are only searching content that has been created or uploaded or added to OSF. We're not aggregating other sources and searching those. So it is only a search of the OSF database. So you may want to search other databases, and like I said, all databases tend to work a little bit differently, so it's worthwhile to learn a little bit about each of those so that you're searching them in the most effective way. Anything from OSF that has a DOI will also be searchable at DataCite or Crossref. So those are places you could search that would search OSF plus lots of other content. However, it won't be searching all of OSF, only the things that folks have created a DOI for. So I'm going to go ahead and move on and finish us up. Let's get back to where we were. So, just as I said, we have some more information about our upcoming sessions. We're going to be doing these OSF Essentials once a month, every Thursday at this time. Sorry, every Thursday, every last Thursday at this time. Our next one is on scoping and systematic reviews. We're going to do one on how to create fair metadata, licensing basics, and we have a bunch of other topics. So if you go to cos.io/events/OSF. You can see the list of these. You can sign up for all of them now, or you can sign up for the ones that you're interested in. All right, so that's all we have for today. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope this was helpful. You'll receive an email soon with links to slide and video, and we hope to see you again next month for our next OSF Essentials topic. So thanks, everybody. Have a great day.